Hey, welcome everybody. This is Islia Heckat from publicanawak.com, and today I'll be introducing you to lesson 5 of the Pre-columbian Codices 101 series. And today we're going to be looking at the Marriage Almanacs. Okay, so in 3 different Pre-columbian codices, there are sections that correspond to predicting what your marriage will be like with a particular partner. And so this section was actually really important when we were talking about marriage in pre-Columbian societies. The 3 books that we're going to be looking at are we're going to be looking at the Codex Borgia again. We've been looking at it for a few times now. This particular image is from the Codex Borgia, and we're also going to be looking at the Codex Laud and also the Codex Vaticanus B. Okay, so there's 3 different codices. They're all in the what's called the Borgia group, which means they're all from similar areas, mainly around the Tlaxcala area. And so you'll see some similarities between the 3, but the reason why I'm going to be showing you all 3 is just because each page actually corresponds to the other books and actually adds layers of meaning. So this, for example, is from the Borgia. This is one of the pairs. If you count up the dots, this is how we do it here. We count up the dots. It's 5, 10, 15, 17. Okay, and so when you count it up, this is what a marriage would be like for a man and a woman whose birth signs, the numerals in front of the birth signs, add up to 17. Okay, so I hope that you're seeing now that our ancestors were really trying to make sense of the world around them, but also trying to make sense on how they fit within that world. Okay, so when it comes to the directions, we looked at the directions in the previous lesson, and time of birth, it becomes a really important aspect of our lives, because where we were born, what time we were born, what day sign we were born under, it determines the tonalli that we inherit. And our ancestors believe that the tonalli resides in the head, and it's responsible for a lot of different aspects in our lives, including our personality and our skills in life that lead to achievements in life. And so these numerals were very important. And so when we read the Marriage Almanac, you're actually, again, you're taking the numeral from the woman and then the numeral from the man, and you're putting them together to create the scene of your marriage. So this marriage prediction, this one is actually really good marriage prediction. If a man, for example, had a numeral of 10 and the woman had 7, you'd add 10 plus 7 and you'd get this. And this is kind of just describing what their life will be like. And so again, very important for our ancestors. I mean, if it's in 3 different codices, you can imagine how important it is to our ancestors. So we're looking at what day were you born on, and then we're adding them together, because you're taking the energies from both of those numbers and then you're mixing them together, because there's a marriage now, and so that's why it results in sum. And so these sections were actually not well understood for many years. Many people tried to figure out what was happening in these scenes, and mostly everybody got it wrong. They were just making guesses, and they had no idea what was happening until somebody looked at an important document from the Zapoteca, and that helped us to read these books. And so what we're going to do today in this lesson is just try to understand how sometimes to understand these pre-Columbian codices, we need to rely on some primary sources that may have been written after the conquest. And so in this particular case, we would not know unless it was for those primary sources, because they actually give us a formula. And so we're going to look at that in a little bit, but first I'm going to start with the wedding dates. Okay, so I've actually heard or seen people asking, well, what's a good date according to our ancestors to get married? That's actually a really good question, and our ancestors actually had an answer to that question. So if you remember back in lesson 3 when we looked at the directional trees or directional scenes, sorry, in the Codex Borgia, you will remember that the eastern direction, which is here, and the western direction, they were both really positive directions. And so what we said last time is that this couple, they're inside of a very nice house. Same here, very nice house. They have warmth, they have blankets, and so everything on the east was actually really positive. And so these are all the signs that go with the west and that go with the east. And these are understood to be the beginning of each trecena. So it would be one sipakli, one akatl, one coat, one olin, and so on. Okay, so these are all one. So if you want to have a good marriage date, you'd want to pick one of these. And how do we know that? Well, that directional scene, if you remember, it had a ton of information. It had information on how to calibrate your calendars. It had information about the directional trees and the birds and the specific that that were in that direction. And so there was so much information. However, this particular part here is actually an almanac. This is actually telling us what are the days that you would want to get married on. Because if you remember, the days in the south and the days in the north, or the directional scenes, they were not positive like this. And so you wouldn't want to be married in on a day that falls in the north or the south as a result. And so, like I said before, when you look at primary sources, they actually guide you sometimes and they help you to understand the meaning of these pre-Columbian codices. And if we look here, this is from the Florentine Codex, which was written by a Spanish priest by the name of Sahagun. He says, once a man and woman agreed to marry, they sought a day of good fortune, a sign of good disposition, which were crocodile, monkey, reed, and rain. So crocodile, monkey, reed, rain. He stopped there. But if you continue, then it would be Coat, Osomatli, Olin, Kali, At, and Cuautli. And so these are all of the days that are acceptable to be married on because, again, you want to, everything about our ancestors was about improving our tonalli. Okay. How can we make ourselves better? How can we make our marriage better? Well, we'll get married on a day that has a lot of really good tonalli, and that we will inherit. And so that's the reason here for these days. And if you're wondering about this source, like I said, it was written after the conquest. And so it's not, the Florentine Codex is not a pre-Columbian codex. However, it can be really helpful when we're trying to understand pages like this because the people who wrote those books, it was not Sahagun and the Spaniards like a lot of people think. It was actually Nahuas scribes. These are the people, the children of all of the nobles from Tenochtitlan and other areas. They actually were brought in by Sahagun to conduct this research. And although they may have been too young to remember much, they actually used a very important strategy. They went to all the elders in that are still living in the city who lived before the Spaniards, and they asked them for all their information. So what you have with the Florentine Codex, although there are some pages that are heavily biased because those Nahuatl scribes who were writing it, they were Christianized, and so they had a Christian worldview. There are a lot of pages that are really important and helpful, like this one, because all they did, again, they asked these elders, well, when would you get married? And the elders told them, these are the days. And if we look at our pre-Columbian codices, it actually corroborates what they said. Okay, so whenever you can do that, that's really powerful because now we have the evidence, now we have the understanding and the reason. Oh, this is the reason why they were born on these days. Okay, so if you ever want to get married, if you're consulting with somebody, giving advice, these are the days that you want to choose for when you get buried. So again, you want not buried, sorry, married, but you want to improve your tonalli as much as possible. And that's part of this whole idea of marriage in the first place. You know, our ancestors thought it was a really important thing because you're starting a family, you're going to have children, hopefully, and you always want the best for your children and for your family. And so, why would you get married with somebody that's going to result in a very negative household? We don't want that. And so that's why they did these predictions in the same way that they did for children who were born on particular day signs. And so this is just a review of lesson 3 when we talked about the eastern direction, and then we talked about the western direction. You can see the married couple here. All right, so going back to how we even know this is a marriage almanac in the first place. A lot of times people will say things like, why are you always studying the Aztecs? You know, why the Mexica? Why don't you study other cultures that may be part of your ancestry? And the answer to that is the Aztecs, the Mexica, their culture is very well documented. I mean, there are so many codices that we can look at and will look at that really were documented to describe what their daily life was, how they determine marriage dates, all kinds of things. We don't have that level of documentation for any other group, including the Maya. The Maya, we know a lot about them because of their own inscriptions and their buildings, but there's really not many books at all on the Maya or any other groups, including the Zapoteca. And so what we need to do sometimes is we need to triangulate some data and say, all right, if this was happening in Tenochtitlan, what is the evidence that it was happening in other areas in Mesoamerica as well? And this is exactly what's happening here. Juan de Cordova in 1578, so again, after the conquest, he described how the Zapoteca, so that's way south, near where the Olmecs used to live, determined the fate of a potential marriage based on the sum of the days, the day numbers of the bride and the groom. The total was divided by 2. If any number was left over, the couple would have a son. Next, the original total was divided by 3, 4, and then 5. If numbers were left over after each division, additional children would follow. The number totals that produced the most children were 7, 11, 13, 19, and 23. So as you can see, all even number totals prevented children. And so in the Zapoteca worldview, the odd numbers are better than the even numbers as a result. And so where we actually see that in all 3 of the codices that we're looking at, those 3 codices actually follow this formula exactly. And it's really amazing because, like I said, the Zapoteca are really far from Tlaxcala and Tenochtitlan. However, we know that they utilize the same formula, so that we can then infer for the Zapotecas, it must have been really similar. They must have really thought that odd number totals were desirable when you're finding someone to get married with, and even number totals were not as desirable. And so when you look at these codices, we can actually rebuild the culture of other people as well, okay? Because there were other cultures as well that I didn't include here that also had this idea of odd numbers were better than even numbers. And this is the reason why, okay? This formula right here explains so much. And so we're going to see, like I said, all the codices, they're all going to follow this formula to a T. It's really amazing how accurate it is. Now, when I said all even numbers totals prevented children, I want you to remember that our ancestors had a scientific worldview. And so they didn't think that, okay, we're not going to have children at all. That's not what they meant by this. They meant that sometimes you have children and maybe they die at an early age, or maybe they're mistreated by their parents, or maybe they're really they misbehave and they're not obeying. Those are all the 3 worst nightmares of our ancestors. Those are the 3 that they really hoped that they did not get children like that. And so we know that because when we look at day signs, it'll actually predict if you'll have children and what will happen to your children. Okay, so again, there's other places in the codices that we can look to confirm this. So the more sources that you can get, the better. But we're going to go ahead and start off with all of the even number totals. And I want to show you all the even number totals. There's a lot of negative aspects to them, whereas all the odd number totals, very positive. And so I'm going to just teach you how to read all of these different components so we know what's negative and what's positive. And so I'll go a little fast because there are quite a few slides to cover all of the 26 scenes. But we'll start off here. So this is a 2. So we're starting off with the evens. We'll go 2, 4, 6, 8 all the way through to 26. Because and 26 is the max, in case you're wondering, because you can only be born up to the day 13. Nobody can ever be born in a 14th Sipakli, for example, because our tonalli goes through 13 numerals and 20 days. Okay, and so that's why we're looking at a total of 26. When we look at this, so I'll start over here with the Vaticanus B, and you can see right here there is the giant Sipakli, which is our Earth Mother, or also called Tlahtecutli. And Tlahtecutli is actually devouring the family. In this case, the child. Okay, you can see the mother has a very evil grin on her, and so looks like she's killing this child. Anytime, as we said in lesson 3, anytime somebody is going into Tlahtecutli's mouth or the giant Sipakli, that means that they're dying. Okay, and so in this case, it's very clear that mother has him by the hair and is killing her child. And the father has another child, and he's eating his child. And he has the Mekisli on him. And so here, this is the Codex Laud. You can see, again, they have the Mekisli components in their jaws. And they're also killing this child. And the child is dying. Now, it's amazing how similar these are, and you're going to see that the Codex Borgia actually adds layers of meaning. As I said in the very beginning, the Codex Borgia is the most detailed, hands down, of the pre-Columbian Codices, and we're so lucky to have it. We have Tlahtecutli here eating the child, just like he is here. Now, in this case, instead of falling into the earth monster's jaws, the mother is actually cutting the neck of the child. So if it wasn't clear before that this mother is killing this child, that she has a flint knife and she's decapitating the child. Okay, and so you might notice that we're pretty well dressed. Okay, they've got sandals on, huipiles, and there's also this snake, this red snake, this coral snake. You can see him here, and you can see him here. The coral snake is actually the Nawali Flazoteo. And depending on the situation, it can mean fertility, or it can mean infidelity. Okay, so in this case, it probably means fertility. Like you can have kids, but you're going to end up mistreating them, unfortunately. And so the other component here that's really important is this. If you remember from lesson 3, we said that any sign here, this is tonalli, also the glyph for theot. And so this is a very positive glyph. And so it's telling us that, there's a lot of really good fortune that'll come out. However, it's cut in half. And so here you have night on the other side. And so what this is saying is, yes, you'll have some nice things. Maybe you might be rich, you might be well dressed. But the darkness comes in where, you're going to mistreat your kids and you're going to kill them. And so our ancestors didn't necessarily see this as literal. They could have been metaphorical as well. But in this case, you can see that they're making it very literal to really drive that point home. This is 4, the next even number. And so in this case, you can see that the coral snake is around the neck of the man in this marriage. The coral snake in Nahuatl is actually Tlapapalcoatl, the red snake. Okay, so the striped snake. And so again, Nawali of Tlazoteo, Tlazotero was the eater of filth, and she kind of redeemed us of our transgressions that were related to sexuality. So in this case, this means that the man is mistreating the woman with infidelity. Okay, and she's turned away here, she's turned away here, and here she's facing him. But you can see, even though she's not turned away physically, you can actually see that this pot, this jar, is actually turned over. Anytime you see a jar turned over, that usually means there's conflict. So there's conflict between these two, probably because of the infidelity of the man. And the really interesting thing is the woman is holding a Quetzal Bird. And as we learned in our lesson 3 as well, or lesson 4, the Quetzal Bird is very, very sacred and precious. And so this is telling us that the woman in this relationship will be a very good woman. However, the man is the one that's really tarnishing the marriage here and putting stress on the marriage. So as you can see, our ancestors really had it down. They really saw what the conflicts were in marriage, and they really enumerated them very well here. Here you have jewels. Okay, these are jewels, and it actually looks like they're fighting over them. They're actually pulling them, they're tugging on them. You can't really tell until you get to the more detailed Codex Borgia, which then shows us the man is actually trying to kill her with an axe, or threatening her with the axe, so that he can take the jewels from her. Okay, and so here's another dead baby as well. So again, doesn't mean that you're not going to have babies. You're going to have babies, but they may die prematurely, or like the other one said, you may destroy your own kids. And so in this case, they're fighting over what they have, and so there's conflict coming from that. And again, there's no tonalli sun here, so this is completely dark. Okay, so everything here is completely dark, whereas when you have half a tonalli, at least you have a chance of doing something good with the marriage, whereas if you have this, everything is going to be negative. So here we have a woman with 2 seated children. They're here as well. This jar is turned over. These children don't look happy. So maybe there's an argument. Maybe they're upset. The woman in this case has the skull, and the man has the maíz. Anytime you see that, that represents abundance. And so maybe this is in contrast to the previous. Maybe it's the woman in this case. Her hair is actually tangled and disheveled. And so in our codices, you'll see whenever that happens, that is the root of chaos. And it's related to Miklampa, Miklan. Okay, so in this case, it's the woman that's being singled out as the person who's causing the conflict. And the jar is overturned, and these kids are watching as the conflict occurs. And here you have another couple. There's a bird here, and over here you see the man is drumming. He has a drum. He also has a drum here. Indicates maybe that the male is going to be like a singer or a dancer, and the woman is here, and the woman has a quetzal in her head. Her hair is well made. Okay, but this pot is actually turned over. So this may be something, because you have some Mikisli iconography here on this person. So maybe there's something related to the music and the arts that is causing conflicts here with this particular marriage. And so that's our sign of conflict, but also you have darkness, half darkness. And this bird is actually eating out of this bowl. So that could signify something as well. Here you have a couple, they have their arms crossed, and there is a tree that's being cut. And so there is blood coming out of the tree. This man is holding a bag. They both have those 2 snakes wrapped around in their hair. So that could represent infidelity on both parties. And so that might be the result of the conflict. And then you have the darkness here, and also the jaw of Mikisli. So there's something definitely negative going on there. Here, the man is turned away from the woman. There is a scorpion to represent something that stings, something that is stinging them. And again, the jar overturned with the coral snake. And so there's some kind of conflict here. They do have some corn. Again, the tonalli is here. So there, again, there's going to be some positives whenever you see that. In this case, there's a spun cotton. Spun cotton is a symbol of order. And so in this case, is going to be, our ancestors would say, you know, it's neutral. There's going to be conflict, but you can actually get past it. And something really important as we go through these is our ancestors believed that a lot of hard work and a lot of offerings could actually remediate any negative associations. Our ancestors always said that you may be born a really negative sign, or you may be married to a person who gives you a negative marriage sign. However, with a lot of hard work, you can actually overcome that. And in our ancestors' view, when you have half the night and half the light, it makes it even easier because there's less obstacles there. So here you have the woman. She has the Mikisli jaw. So this is the source of conflict. However, the man also has some coral snakes here. And so this could possibly be infidelity. And he has an axe. And she has some kind of weapon as well. And so there's a conflict there. And the red snake is going through one of the jars. So here's another day there, or another sign where you have the coral snakes. Okay, in this case, it looks like it's strangling them. So they're literally being strangled by their infidelities. They have 2 children here, and they're holding them up. But you can see that the moon, or it's the moon here, that it's complete darkness. And so they actually don't have much. We're going to see in the more positive, because we're still in the even numbers, these are the more negative ones. But when we get to the positive, then we're going to start to see they really have a lot more than what these have. Okay, they have a little chair, and they have some clothes, not the best clothes, and that's pretty much it. And they have their kids, but they also have this coral snake. In this context, whenever combined with the night, that's going to represent something negative. Okay, and here you have, this is really interesting. This one is, they're angry at each other, and then this one you can actually see that the man is actually cutting his neck with a flint knife. But the woman is actually very well dressed. She's got her flowers on. And so this indicates that all of the light of this marriage will be on the wife, whereas all of the darkness will be on the male. And so you can see that clearly here. This one, whenever you see Coscacuautli, which is a vulture, that usually means old age. In this case, they may grow to be old, but they're actually fighting for jewels. Okay, so again, there's conflict here. Body is turned away. Half light here. There is a child here as well. So again, it doesn't mean that they're not going to have any kids at all. You're going to have kids, but you know, it may be a conflict. This one is my favorite. This one is really great because here you have the man. He's actually speaking excrement, which is poop. So when this is the symbol for poop, so he's actually saying whatever he's saying is a lie, or it's not anything good. And so the woman is here with her bird, and she's actually giving offerings here. So the woman is good. The man is actually the source of the conflict, and he's actually holding a sipakli, which is associated with the penis. And so you have the coral snake missing here, but you have the sipakli. I said sipakli, sorry, Quetzalin. Quetzalin, the lizard, represents his sexuality here. And this, whenever you see arrows in the household, that means that there's a conflict going on. Okay, so there's a conflict here. And the Codex Borgia, like we've seen, really illustrates it well. The woman is a very good woman. She's highly valued, we know, because she's holding a Quetzal Bird once again, and she's pulling the hair of her husband, who has a coral snake coming out of his loincloth. So instead of the Quetzalin, it's been interchanged with the coral snake. So this is going to represent infidelity, and you can see it very clearly right here. He's grabbing the breast of another woman, and his wife is trying to bring him back in. So here is the arrows in the shield represents the conflict. So this one really just puts all of the concepts that we've talked about all together into one, like really, really well. And so here you have another one where, you know, they grow in old age, but so that's one positive because, again, you know, you have half the sun here, but even though they grow to old age, there's conflict. Arrows are here. Children are going to die at an early age. And so, again, there's the negative and then there's the positive kind of mixed together whenever you have the tonalli and the metzli together. So those are all the even sums. I hope that you and your partner don't fall under any of these, or if you do, I hope that you're able to work it out and, you know, work hard on your marriage to get it going to where it's supposed to be. But the odd sums, these are the ones that are really favorable for our ancestors. And so you're going to see the differences very clearly here. You have, they're sitting down here. They have a lot of objects here, a lot of jewels and food, and the seats are even nicer. Look at the seat that the woman is on. And you have full tonalli. Okay, so it's full tonalli, so it's all light. Everything is good. This is a tool that she's going to use to pierce herself for self-offering. Okay, and so again, like I said, if you work hard, you can overcome any of these predictions. But the other thing is working hard and also making offerings, and that's, you're going to see it often here. It was missing from all the other ones, if you notice, in the even section, because they were not making offerings. They were not participating in ceremonies, and so they were not completing their obligation. These ones, however, are. And so we can see that there's corn, there's jewels. I mean, this is just very clear. They have a lot of food, they have a lot of wealth. And going back here, he has a snake here, coral snake, but in this case, since it's a positive situation, it's not infidelity. This is fertility instead. Okay, so a lot of times when we look at certain objects, you know, we can't just say they're bad. We can't just say the coral snake is bad. The coral snake is good in some situations because it means fertility. And in this case, that's what it is. So you just have to have that tonalli to switch up the meaning of the coral snake. And so here you have something growing. It's not cut like the other one. If you remember back in the evens, something was growing as well, a tree, but it was cut in half. So that means to say, like, okay, you'll accomplish things, but then it'll just be taken away. Our ancestors would say you would accomplish something and then it'll be carried away like the water. The water will carry it away, or the wind will blow it away. That's kind of how we described it. And so here, it's not being cut. Therefore, we know that this is something that's positive. Everything that they grow will bloom. Again, Coscacuautli, the vulture, represents old age. And so you have old age here. There's offerings here, and so everything looks good here. I think the man even has a headdress in this one. Okay, so as you can see, very different. In this case, if you saw my lesson from last week, lesson 4, you'll know that eagle feathers and jaguar pelts were very, very rare. And so for this couple to have jaguar pelts and eagle feathers, that means that they are doing very, very well. Not only are they doing well and they're wealthy, but they actually have access to the items that are most sacred and rarest as well, hard to get. They also have rubber ball here. They have food. So there's a lot of good stuff going on there. There's jewels here. So you can see jewels, and then there's corn. So they have food. They have a lot of objects here, a lot more than we saw in the evens. They have nice, very nice clothing. If you can see, they have nice headdresses, clothing, and they have their jewels, and they have offerings. They're giving these offerings. This is actually an offering of rubber. And so, if you remember last class, I talked about how many rubber balls there were. Well, they weren't all played for the ball game. They were actually used for offerings. And so that we see here. All right, so here's the next one. So the Quetzal Bird, first time that it's in the hands of a male in this case. So male is sacred, has the Quetzal Bird. They have the tools again for the self-piercing or the offering of their own blood. And again, everything looks good. There's a coral snake here. That's a good thing, or represents fertility in this situation. Now here you have another eagle headdress. So this couple is doing really, really well. If you remember from last class, this is the Shikipili, the number Shikipili, which is 8,000, but it's also a bag for copal, incense. And so they actually put their copal in this bag. It looks exactly like this. And so he's making offerings. He has copal for his offerings and all of the other tools that we talked about. And if you notice as I go through these, none of these containers are overturned, okay? In the even, a lot of them were just overturned, representing conflict. There's no arrows here. There's nothing to represent any type of conflict. And how could it be when the tonalli is here complete? So here he is making offerings. So paper, probably putting his blood onto the paper with his piercing tool. Usually they use stingray spines to do that on top of a rubber ball. And the woman is actually turned away for some reason. But in this case, there's a tree growing, and they have a lot of objects here. It's actually overflowing. So whenever you have a bowl overflowing, that's actually a good thing, because that means you have so much, you have an abundance, more than you need. So here again, Quetzal Bird with the man, woman, everybody's well dressed, and they have all the tools for offerings. Nothing is overturned. She has a paper offering, paper vestment offering with rubber, and we'll learn more about that when we look at other codices, especially the Frigeveri Meyer. In this case, however, you know, the Borgia is really positive, but there's something going on with the Laud and the Vaticanus B that is, it could be regional, but there's skull and bones, there's Mikisli skulls. Although they have nice things, like the spun cotton in her hair and the jewelry, the man seems to be killing or stabbing her with a spear. And in this case, it actually looks like it's a mako wheat. So he's stabbing her. You can see the blood falling here. So maybe there's a regional difference here. First time we see something different. So there's something going on in these two areas that is not going on here, because everything is really good here. So there's something else that may have to do with the number itself. So let's count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So it's number 23. So if you want to do more research on that, you may find something, but I'm not sure why they're different, but they are. It's very, very clearly negative here and very clearly positive here. So here, these are actually similar again. And in this case, the child is dying. So it's going to Mikisli. And so this is to say not everything will be perfect, right? You might suffer some of the other negative attributes associated with the even, especially if you're not doing any offerings, okay? And so there's something going on with this couple that is resulting in this child being eaten by Mikisli or dying. And so again, just because you have a full tonalli, our ancestors would say, hey, just because you have a good tonalli, it does not automatically mean that you will receive good. If you get lazy, or if you don't work hard, or you don't do your offerings, all of that could actually fall apart. And they wrote about that extensively. The elder said, if you're not careful, you will lose all the benefits of your tonalli. So our ancestors believed in really hard work that we carry on today. you have to work really hard to get what you need. And so by not doing that, sometimes your fate can falter. And so this is actually the last one. And so that is the end of my presentation. If you have any comments or questions, please put them in the in the comment section below. But these 3 books are actually available for free from my website. I'll put a link in them in the YouTube section. But thanks for watching, and let me hear your feedback. Oh, and also, if you're not already a Patreon, please consider signing up. These classes are ongoing, and so I'm going to just continue teaching about the Pre-columbian Codices. And so if you're interested in joining, please check the link below.